What's up, Joe? What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Sports 360. I'm Jeff Fannell, and as always, I'm here with my man Rob Duran of Rob Duran Sports. Rob, what's up today?
Hey, what's going on, Jeff? What's going on, man?
Good to be back. Talking sports, with you, and just kicking some things around as we're about to do. So that's always good. But as we were chatting briefly before we came on, we find ourselves here on this Monday evening once again with some events outside of sports that continue to happen far too often, right? And talking about a police shooting and killing of an uh, unarmed black man in a traffic stop in Minnesota, and a school shooting in Nashville, Tennessee, a mass shooting. So, we've seen too much of events of this type, right? I mean, it's nothing new, and that's unfortunate to say that. Um, and you just never get numb to these things. You know what I mean? It just always strikes a nerve every time something like this happens. And, so here we find ourselves again, in a situation like this. And it just, it's tough. It's tough to be in this place yet again.
Yeah, man, it's truly heartbreaking to see that. It's almost like you're just kind of waiting for something else to happen because it's become too common in our lives, and in society and stuff like that. And it's heartbreaking, man. It's so sad to see these things continue to happen, and you just left to wonder, when does it end, or will it ever end? And it's heartbreaking, man.
Yeah. And to be respectful, I mean, a young man in Minnesota, his name was Dante Wright, 20 years old. And, again, it's just, it's really a tough pill to swallow. And, it happens at a time when, the trial and the George Floyd murder is ongoing. And so, um, emotions are probably already a bit high and rubbed a bit raw right now. And now we have this. And as it turns out, we had an NBA game, an NHL game, and an MLB game all scheduled to be played in Minnesota tonight. And all three of those games have been postponed. So, again, we find ourselves here in an unfortunate situation, unfortunate being not even an apt word to describe where we are. But again, we just find ourselves here, and it makes things tough. Um, and you should talk about sports, but listen, we'll find our way through it, and we got to hope that at some point, right, we'll start to see some change. I mean, I guess that's the only thing we really got to continue to push for and to hope for and to work toward.
Yeah, and that's really, like you said, that's all we can do, because you just hope one day it ends. That's all we can hope for, man.
Yeah. And so, with that as an unfortunate backdrop, wanted to talk tonight about the NBA. The NBA is indeed about to hit its home stretch. I mean, we're coming up on mid-April, so we have about 5 or 6 weeks or so left in the NBA season, and things are starting to percolate and get interesting. And it's interesting, Rob, because in both of the conferences, right, this year, you know, teams 1 through 6 make the playoffs, and then teams 7 through 10 are going to be in a play-in situation. And so that will be interesting to see it as it unfolds. But when we look at each of the conferences, the West once again is just ultra competitive with so many good teams out there. And in the East, it's top heavy with Brooklyn, Philly, and Milwaukee. And then you have a couple of other teams like Miami and Boston who've been there before. Atlanta's been playing well. And then after that, you have, teams that are going to be happy to be there, right? Um, but it's out west, man. And we'll get into it in more detail, but just generally speaking, West is going to be rough.
Yeah, man. Talk 1 through 8. Just looking at them, I'm glad the Knicks are in the East and they don't have to face any of these teams right now. Not that we said the top heavy East is a tier above the rest, but my goodness, all these teams are stacked, man. I look at a team like Dallas sits at number 7, and at any point those guys can go off and just destroy you, drop 130 points on you. That Western Conference, man. Wow.
Yeah. And we'll talk about it in some detail. I'd like to start out East because I think the conversation there is a little more direct. And again, not to assume anything because there's some interesting storylines out East as well. But you're right about Dallas, and we'll come back and talk about that because as long as you have, Doncic out there, in a playoff series, he's the kind of player who can win you a series by himself because
Yeah.
of the type of talent that he is. Let's start out East, where we talk about the three teams at the top. Philly, Brooklyn, and Milwaukee, and right now, all three of those teams, although they are uh, sort of separated themselves from the rest of the teams in the East. It's not as if they don't have problems, though, or some concerns, at least at this point. And we'll see how it plays out when we get to the playoffs. But, Philly, they're still working Embiid back in, and can he stay healthy? The Nets haven't been able to stay healthy. Their big three, at least the big two in terms of Durant and Harden, they've had some injury histories. Kyrie has been out of the lineup. He wasn't going to play tonight, in fact, because of personal reasons. He's been out of the lineup, sometimes as well. And the other thing, though, Rob, is that the big three on the Nets haven't played together. Right now, they've only played 7 games. And so, are they going to be able to develop a chemistry? Right? Is Harden going to come back in time? Is Durant going to get his legs under him? And will they be able to mesh? And then with Milwaukee, Giannis has been bothered by a bulky knee over the past few games, right? And, is that an issue? They're saying not, but you never know, right? And so these teams are head and shoulders above everybody else, but they have some issues themselves.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up Brooklyn because when they first traded for Harden and we had a show, we spoke about that chemistry and how they're gonna, mesh and all these things, and we still haven't seen that. And it's been, I don't know how many games they've played since they've traded for Harden, but it's been quite a few games, and they still haven't been able to get something going consistently with all three guys. And they've added some pieces to add to the depth of the rotation and all that stuff. But man, it'll be interesting to see when these guys are healthy. You assume maybe for the playoffs they'll all be ready to go, no restrictions or anything like that. But it'll be really interesting to see that first round series that they play in and how those three guys really come together on the court.
Yeah, it will be. It will be. And I think, and it'll be interesting to see too what is going to be the ultimate ordering here. Who's going to be, 1, 2, and 3. Because, you know, I think if you're in the one slot, you end up playing 8. You know what I'm saying? That might be the Knicks or whatever, right? If the Knicks maintain their spot, and come out of the play-in. But you know, you do have some other teams that right now have had some uneven performance in the current season, but who could be dangerous in the East. And I'm talking about Milwaukee and Boston, not Milwaukee, Miami and Boston.
Mm,
Miami with Jimmy Butler and Eric Spoelstra on the sidelines, and they have a deep team. They play really well together. Defensively, they play, as a really cohesive unit when you watch them out on the floor. It's like they move in unison. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like when they need to switch, it's not like a clumsy switch, or it's like they move in unison. And so it makes it very hard in the half court for teams to score when you got a guy like Adebayo and Jimmy Butler, anchoring that defense and just having a strong defensive philosophy. And they've been there, right? Last year they went to the finals, right? And so, you got to watch out for them. And then the other team who we pegged as the most disappointing team in the NBA, the Boston Celtics. They look like they're starting to hit their stride. And so can't count out either one of those two teams.
Yeah, I love the way Miami plays. And they started off the season pretty in rough shape. They had some injuries and other concerns and stuff like that. So they started off a little slow. And I think a lot of people were worried. But then some people had that let's wait and see approach. And we're seeing now, how this team plays together. And Jimmy Butler, man, I don't think he gets enough credit, to be honest. What he did with Philly last year, or not last year, the year before, and then with Miami last year, leading them to the finals, and then what he's doing this year too, man. The guy's a star, and defensively, him and Bam, they're tough, man. They're a tough bunch. They don't have much quit in them, and I think it's awesome to see that, man.
Yeah, yeah, and so we have to look out for them. And then Boston, had a big win yesterday. Yesterday being Sunday, over the Denver Nuggets in Denver. They were trailing most of that game until midway through the third quarter, and then went on some crazy run, man. Something like 31-3.
Yeah,
And just ran Denver out of their own gym, snapping a 7-game winning streak for the Nuggets. The Nuggets were at that point one of the hotter teams in the league and still are. But Boston has, they seem to have turned it around. Again, given the way their season has been, though, you don't want to get too fast in proclaiming Boston is back, but they're getting there. They're starting to look that way, though, Rob. They're starting to look a little scary.
yeah. I think they've been listening. They've been listening to us. That's what it is, you know. Yeah, they're playing some really good ball. Jason Tatum is stepping up to another level, which is what you want to see. Because at the end of the day, he's the guy that makes that engine go. He's the leader of that team, and he just has to, he has to do what he does, man. He's a superstar in the making, and they're 7-3 in their last 10, 3-game winning streak. I think they have a possibility and a chance to move up in the rankings. They're at number 7 right now. They could move up to, as high as maybe 5, if not even 4, depending on what happens with the teams above them and stuff like that. But if they click on all cylinders, they're a team to watch because they can be very, very dangerous in the playoffs.
Yes, no doubt. I mean, and you mentioned Tatum. I mean, he dropped 53 on the Timberwolves a
Yeah,
couple of games ago. And he's just continuing to show himself to be, a budding superstar, right? I think right now he's a star. He's a star,
yeah,
he's an all-star. But then you get to that realm of superstar, right? Where you're the guy, night in, night out, year after year. He's growing into that kind of a guy. And
and he
so,
has that potential. He has it.
yes, yep. And so when you have a superstar on your team, and then you can surround him with some really good players. And Boston, with Smart and with Jaylen Brown and with Kemba Walker, those are good players. You always will have a chance. And so Boston finds, themselves in that kind of a spot, So, the East is interesting. You got the top 3, and then you have, some two teams in Miami and in Boston who've been there before and seem to be hitting their stride. Um, Atlanta. Atlanta's a team that's been playing well. I will go on record of saying I'm not expecting a lot from Atlanta. I'm sorry. I mean, Atlanta to me has always been an NBA. I mean, you go back to the Dominique days, you know what I mean? I'm going back, you know what I mean? But, Atlanta is good and they'll make the playoffs or whatever. But is Atlanta ever really a championship contender? No. And I don't
Yeah,
think this year is any different. But they are playing well since Nate McMillan took the helm. They're 15-5 since Nate has become the head coach. And so they've been playing well. Right now they're in the fourth spot. But I think Miami is going to catch them. And, Boston continues to play well, Boston could catch them. So, yeah, Atlanta's playing well, but I'm not getting overly excited about Atlanta. I'm sorry.
no, me either. I think they benefited from Miami and Boston's kind of back and forth, and they reaped the benefits of that. We mentioned Charlotte. Their team, they lost LaMelo Ball, what is a huge loss. Probably would have won Rookie of the Year. So that's another huge loss. But yeah, as far as Atlanta goes, they have some talent. They're a decent bunch. I like the way they're playing now. But yeah, I think Miami and Boston, if they continue to play the way they're playing, can they'll jump over Atlanta.
Yeah. And for right now, Atlanta, again, you got to give them credit for what they've been able to do. But, and this is where it starts to tail off, in my opinion, in the East, right? Because, after you get, when you get to Atlanta and then you get to Charlotte, and then you get to the Knicks, right? You know, you're going to start running into teams who are going to be happy to be in the playoffs, but no one expects
Yeah,
deep runs from the teams that are down there, right, in the 6, 7, 8 spot. And I think that's what we're going to have out there. Now, this week though, again, Philly and Brooklyn are going to match up. So that's going to be an interesting tilt. They play on Wednesday. And we'll see if Kyrie is back at that point. Harden won't be,
no,
um, but it'll be an interesting matchup, and it's a key matchup, right? They've split the series so far, the season series so far, and this is the tiebreaker, right? This is going to be the third and final matchup of the season, and so this could be key. This could be what separates the two seed if those remain in their current spots. And so if they end up tied, Wednesday's game could end up being the tiebreaker.
yeah, and I think advantage goes to Philly here, just because there are so many question marks about Brooklyn. Like you said, Harden's going to be out. Who I think at the end of the day with Brooklyn, KD may be the best player in the league when healthy, and Kyrie is a masterful finisher at the rim. Never mind his handles, but I think Harden is the engine of the Brooklyn Nets. The way he's played, he's taken over the point guard position. He can drop 50 in his sleep. He's a facilitator. He does all these things for Brooklyn. So I think that's a huge loss for them, and I think advantage Philly in this game coming up.
KD's a phenomenal player. There's no question about it. And Kyrie is phenomenal in his own right. But man, when Harden is on the floor, it's just different. It's just
Yeah,
different. I mean, it's like they're more dangerous when he's playing than when you have KD and Kyrie playing, right? They're still one of the better teams with KD and Kyrie. But man, when Harden is on the floor, it just feels different. Like they just simply can't be stopped
yeah,
because Harden
he
is such an extraordinary offensive player.
yes, that's what I was gonna say. Yep.
Yeah. So I don't know, but going back to what we were saying before, and then we can move on to the West. Are the Nets going to have enough time, assuming Harden comes back healthy, and KD continues to get stronger as he returns from his injury? Are they going to have enough time as the big three to mesh? To me, that's a big question mark for them as we head into the weeks of the season, these final weeks of the season. And I think if you're Steve Nash, you're hoping these guys can get back at the same time so they can get 3 weeks or more under their belt playing together.
Yeah, because as much as you practice and practice, it's different when you go into the game situation, especially going into the play. Like if these guys don't play until the playoffs are a different animal, man. It doesn't matter who you're playing; it's just a different feel. So to have these guys mesh in the playoffs, I'm not saying they're going to lose in the first round. I don't think that they have too much talent for that. But when you get to the second round and beyond, it's going to be a lot of question marks, I think.
Yeah, unless they do get that time in, and we'll see how that goes. And lastly, before we leave the East, gotta tip the hat to the Knicks, hometown Knicks, who continue to just scrap, man. They just continue to scrap. They had a nice win over the Grizzlies at Madison Square Garden, where they came back in the fourth quarter. They were down by double digits. A Grizzlies team that up until that point had been playing pretty well on their road trip. And the Knicks came back and took that game in overtime, won a close one after losing so many close ones to the Nets and the Timberwolves, Boston, and so forth. But the Knicks won a close one. And then last night at the Garden, the Knicks beat the Raptors, another close one. So the Knicks just continue to scrap, right? And no illusions here, right? This is not 1969 or whatever. They're not winning the championship or anything, but it's good to see the Knicks not continue to play games that matter, at least for right now. They got a tough road ahead, but you know, as a Knicks fan, I'm just excited to see them continuing to scrap and to play well.
Yeah, man, I love seeing the way they play. They play hard. One of the best defensive teams in the entire NBA. They're grinding. Thibodeau got those guys working. I love it, man. It's nice to see, you watch a Knicks game and know that they have a chance. And it's not like they're going to take this out or they're going to be an embarrassing team this year. They're doing their thing this year. I'm happy for it. They're still the only New York team in my eyes. I don't care what anybody says about Brooklyn, but, I'm happy the Knicks are competitive this year.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. All right, so let's move out west where, again, man, just really, really tough out there. And, we have to start with the best team in the league, which is Utah. But you also have a Phoenix team that's coming into its own. That's really tough. You got the Clippers, who you have to watch out for, especially since they added, Rajon Rondo to the mix. Denver's been playing really well. Lakers are scuffling without AD and LeBron, but obviously with LeBron, assuming he comes back and he's healthy, and if AD comes back and he's healthy, man, that changes everything. But and then you have some other teams in Portland and Dallas and Memphis who round that out. But let's start with Utah, man. Utah, best record in the NBA. And man, at home, 24 going to Utah, you might as well hang L on people, right? What do you think about Utah, man? They continue to show themselves as being a really tough team.
Yeah, man, they are no joke. Donovan Mitchell, man, I love that guy. The dude is we were talking about Tatum earlier being a star, but I think Donovan Mitchell has reached that superstar level or is very close to it, man. The dude is special. We know what Rudy Gobert can do. One of the best defensive players in the league today. But that team in general, they just grind, man. They don't play like they're the number one seed. They play like they're fighting for something. And that I respect that team, man. The way they coach, the way everything they do is just, man. There's a reason they're the best team in the NBA. Because they don't play like they're just the number one seed and they're the best. They want to earn it, and they're coming, man.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about, when you talk about the Jazz, you have to start with Mitchell and with Gobert.
Yeah.
And then you got a guy like Conley, who's just, continues to be excellent, but is never the type of guy that draws a lot of attention to himself. That Bogdanovich has been playing really well. And then you got Clarkson coming off the bench, right? And so, they've really been, just consistent all year long. And I think it's interesting because when they lost last year to the Nuggets, I think, we can't forget that in the bubble, in the playoffs, they had a 3-1 lead over Denver.
Yeah.
And it seemed as if Utah was going to go on to the Western Conference Finals. And then Denver came back and won that series. And I think that put Quinn Snyder, the coach, on the hot seat, quite frankly. And it remains to be seen this year. It's kind of hard when you're up until this point the best team in the NBA to think that if he doesn't win a championship, they would let him go. You know what I mean? Because obviously he's doing a great job there. But, Utah, I think, went home last year with a bitter taste in their mouth. And to their credit, they've come back this year and they've doubled down. And so far, man, they're making people pay for it. And so I think Utah is dangerous because I think last year losing in the playoffs really stung for them.
Yeah, I definitely agree, man. And LeBron made that comment for the All-Star game, basically saying you kind of forget about Utah and their players because you don't pick them in video games. They're making people remember their name this year, man. They are putting respect on their name.
Yeah, and on that comment, I didn't appreciate that comment. One, it just didn't make any sense.
It didn't.
That you're going to talk about who you pick when you're playing NBA 2K, right? That nobody picked Malone and Stockton. Nobody does that. First of all, let's say that's true. What in the world did that have to do about making your selection
I
for
know.
the All-Star team? That was weak. But I tell you one thing: if Utah and the Lakers end up, meeting, down the road, it'll be interesting to see, what Gobert and Mitchell, if they have a little extra fire in their belly because of that. You know what I mean? But
yeah, and it's funny
but
because I know we're going to talk about the Lakers in a bit, but AD may not be 100%. So Gobert down low with, might get a little elbows in there to AD. Let him know what's up.
yeah, yeah. Phoenix, man. What do you think about Phoenix? I mean, they got Chris Paul out there doing his thing and Devin Booker. We're talking about budding superstars and all the rest of it, right? Here's another guy.
Yeah.
Okay. He didn't originally make the All-Star team this year, and even some of his peers thought that was one of the biggest snubs, if not the biggest snub. He ended up making it in because someone got injured, but Booker's out there doing his thing night after night. Chris Paul is there. You have to like Phoenix, but I'm going to go on record of saying this. I don't know how many times we can get excited about a Chris Paul-led team. And I'm not trying to, you know what I mean? He just has not been able to. And it's not all on him, but at the same time, when, he's a superstar, right?
Yeah.
And, when your teams continually seem to fall short, and again, it's a team game, so it's not all on him, but man, you just like to see him break through. And so, when we get to the postseason, that's going to be one of the storylines for the Phoenix Suns, right? Okay, great regular season, but Chris Paul, can you lead your team deep into the playoffs? But right now, certainly they look like one of the better teams and certainly have been one of the better teams in basketball all year long.
Yeah, and they're a very good and also intriguing team. But I agree with you on the Chris Paul front in the playoffs. But the difference that he's made, I think, for that roster and just for Devin Booker in general, just helping them out, because I know Devin Booker was sometimes under point and stuff like that. But just having a guy in Chris Paul that he's a point guard first, and if you look at his numbers, he's averaging basically his career numbers this year, well, he's averaged for his whole career. So it's not like he's doing anything spectacular statistically, but I think the difference he's made in that locker room, in the rotation, in the line, all that stuff, man, the dude is a stud, and he's continued to show that quote unquote Chris Paul effect on rosters. And I think it's made a difference for Phoenix. And I think that's why they're where they are this year. And why Devin Booker continues to be great, even though, like you said, man, being left off the All-Star team, I think that was disrespectful to him. And I think he's taking that chip and he's gonna make some noise. And I hope they have some type of run in them because Chris Paul deserves it, man. I don't think they're a championship team per se, unless they get like extremely hot in the playoffs. But I'd like their chances definitely in the first round, and it'll be interesting to see what happens later on in the playoffs.
Yeah, it will be to see what happens with them. I mean, I'm a Chris Paul fan and I root for him, and so I would like to see them, make a run in the playoffs, and also too Monty Williams.
Yes.
We're both Knicks fans. Monty Williams to me is always a Knick, right? You know what I mean? Having played for the Knicks for a number of years, and you root for him and so forth. But we'll see what happens with the Suns. But right now, yeah, they continue to play well. Another team to look out for is the Clippers, I think. And here's the thing. Here's what I think about the Clippers, because they've been up and down too throughout the year. They've had some injuries and stuff like that. I think Rondo, key pickup for them.
Huge.
Boogie Cousins is now there, right? And maybe Boogie can give him a little something. But here's the thing I like about the Clippers. I think they have the capability, whether it will happen or not, to really lock it down defensively. When you consider some of the players they have, right? You have Kawhi, you have George, you have Junkyard Dog Patrick Beverly, who is hurt again. He broke his hand, I think, the other day, but he's going to be back in a couple of weeks. But you have him. You also have guys like Nicholas Batum. You know what I mean? Guys who I think
Yeah.
and Marcus Morris. You got some tough guys. You know what I mean? And I think, as you were talking about how playoffs are different. It does come a time where baskets become hard to find in the playoffs, right? You start playing a little bit more half court and everything like that. And maybe that's where the Clippers are going to show their strength a little bit. I don't know, but their roster to me is intriguing because they have some guys who I think are physical and who may be able to put the clamps on you. And in today's NBA, defense is a rarity, right? You talk about the Knicks playing
Yeah.
defense, but the Knicks can't score. But if you could play defense, and I think the Clippers are there. The Lakers are a good defensive team too, but we'll talk about that in a second. But the Clippers are going to be an interesting one to watch as well.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of, I think, you're talking about the Clippers here. They kind of have an opening a little bit here because there's question marks around LA. We just spoke about Phoenix. We don't know exactly how deep they can go in the playoffs. Utah is who they are. They're a great team. But I think everything is kind of shaping up a little bit for the Clippers to try to do something this year in the playoffs. They have the opportunity. They have the talent. Paul George needs to step up in the playoffs. That's number one. If he doesn't step up, they're not going anywhere. Kawhi needs to continue to be Kawhi and be that, two-way player. But the other pieces they have around them, Rondo, man, huge pickup. Playoff Rondo is a real thing. I equate it to to the Yankees when they had Tanaka in the playoffs, except for this past season. But playoff Tanaka was a real thing. Playoff Rondo was a real thing. I don't know what happens to that guy. I don't know if he just chills the whole season and then the playoffs come up and it's just, all right, I'm ready to go now. This is what I get paid for. But that's a huge, huge pickup for them. And I think he's going to make a huge difference come playoff time. So I think this is the Clippers' chance to kind of take advantage of the question marks around them and really make some noise.
Yeah, I like Rondo as well. Rondo was key last year to the Lakers winning the NBA championship. He played a key role last year. And so, yeah, you have to like having a guy like Rondo on your team. And then when you're adding him to the mix, with, and just in the backcourt alone, you got, Beverly, you got Reggie Jackson, right? And then, you just have these other guys in Kawhi and in George, who are who they are. And it'll be interesting. They again have a lot of talent, and this is what you're finding out west with all these teams.
Yeah,
and now here we're at our fourth team, and it's the Denver Nuggets. So we haven't even gotten to the Lakers yet, right? And
man.
then you got the Nuggets with Jamal Murray and Jokic, out there, and they got Aaron Gordon now, and until that loss against the Celtics yesterday, they were on a winning streak. But they're playing some of the best basketball in the league right now, and so you can't overlook Denver either. And we saw what they did last year.
Yeah,
So you got to like them as well, and they're sitting in the fourth spot right now.
yeah. 8-2 in their last 10. Like you said, they just lost to Boston, but the addition of Aaron Gordon, he's not the addition of like a James Harden for Brooklyn, but I think he makes a difference on both sides of the ball, really, and he stretches the floor as well. So I think his addition to that team may have looked like some type of question mark at first, but now you're kind of seeing, you're going to see the benefits of it. I think when it comes to playoff time, but they're a team, man. I'll tell you, they can sneak up on people, and you not realize that suddenly you're in the Western Conference Finals, and the Denver Nuggets are there. And they can sneak up on you like that because they're that talented. And like you said, we saw what they did last year. Jamal Murray putting on a
Yeah,
show. The
yeah.
Joker is the most unathletic looking guy I've ever seen in my life. But the dude can ball, man. The dude,
Right.
he just flat out plays
He
great
sure
basketball.
can. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And again, you have a guy like Murray. We were talking about it with Doncic for a little bit, guys who can take over a series. And Jokic is gonna do it too, right? He's a great, he's just like you said, he's so versatile for a big man.
Yeah.
But Jamal Murray, he showed you he can just go off, and then when you have the Joker down there being able to do his thing, that becomes a pretty lethal combination. And so you have to like Denver and know that they're a dangerous team too. And this is why the West is just so stacked, because when you're talking about these first four teams, man, and you're talking about Utah and Phoenix and the Clippers and Denver, these are some true contenders. And then we come to the Lakers, right? Right now they're scuffling without LeBron and AD, but both are now they have some timetables. We'll see if those timetables are kept. AD about weeks, LeBron about 3 weeks out. If they can come back, be healthy, get some games under their belt, hey, they're the defending champs, and you got LeBron. Oh man, can you imagine if they remain in the fifth seed? And if the first round matchup is a 4-against-5, and they have to play Denver right out the gate, you
That's
know what I'm saying?
gonna,
They're not gonna be the first where they're gonna play Memphis. You know what I'm saying? And
yeah.
and again, this is no disrespect to a team like Memphis, but that's the benefit of being one or two, right? You're playing, if you're one, you're playing eight, you're two, you're playing seven, right? So, you can end up playing Memphis. Right now, Dallas is in seventh. I want to play Dallas. You know what I mean? If I was anybody, you know. I wouldn't want to play Portland with Dame Dollar on there, you know
Oh
what I mean? Because
man,
Dame Dollar can, we've seen Dame just
another guy who
win
can take
series on
over.
his own. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about out west. Think about how many guys out there who can just take over. Donovan Mitchell, Devin Booker, Kawhi Leonard, Jamal Murray, Dame Dollar, Doncic. I mean, that's incredible.
Wow. Wow.
So what do you
I
think about
don't
the
know, man.
Lakers, man? What do you think, though? I mean, yeah, LeBron and AD can come back, but still, should the Lakers still be concerned?
I would definitely, if I'm a Lakers fan, I'm concerned because they're. I don't think, and this is just me talking. I don't think LeBron and AD are going to be 100%, even when they do come back in 3-4 weeks, whenever it is. They're going to come back probably before the season ends, just to kind of get in that game shape. But I don't think they're going to be 100%. That remains to be seen. I mean, we'll see when it happens, but I don't know, man. Especially if they end up playing like a Denver in that first round, that's going to be a tough matchup if those guys are not 100%. And it would not surprise me if Denver beat them it would not be shocked.
The Lakers did, they picked up Drummond, which I think is an interesting pickup for them. And I think he's only going to be better once LeBron is back, because LeBron makes everybody better when he's on the court. But I don't know, man. There's such a value, I think, to being able to play together. And no matter how you slice it, no matter what happens, even under the best case scenario, AD has missed a lot of time this year.
Yeah.
A lot. And that lack of chemistry that you can only get from being on the court together, consistently, maybe that shows up in the playoffs, especially against a team like Utah that up until this point, right, has been healthy and playing together all year long. Phoenix, kind of the same thing. Denver's been a little, Jamal Murray's been out a little bit, but I don't know, man. The Lakers, let's see what happens. But here's the other thing, though, that we know for sure, when you talk about any team that has LeBron James, you can't count them out. You just can't.
Definitely not. No, you can't, because LeBron is LeBron. I don't care if he's 36. I don't care if he's 26, 96. The dude is a stud. He's the greatest player on the planet. So, if he's back at 80%, 85%, they have a chance. He's going to give him a chance. He's going to will it out. He's going to figure it out, something. But it's going to be trouble if they're not at 100%.
Yeah. And then we look at the rest of the West. We touched on some of the teams. Portland, who I think is always going to be a team that can be dangerous because of Dollar and CJ McCollum.
Yeah.
So they can always, and they added Powell from Toronto. And
yeah.
I think he's a good player, but they just seem to me to be just a cut below the elite teams out. I don't know how much we can expect from them. Dallas dangerous again because of Luka, and then you got Porzingis, if he can stay healthy. He's just a tough match. But so they're a dangerous team, and then after that, I think kind of Memphis is nice, and they'll maybe they make the playoffs, and but you have some teams out there that are from the playing standpoint, interesting. Golden State, Tone, and New Orleans. I just got to say this about New Orleans, bruh. Zion Williamson, they've now made this guy a point forward. I mean, so can you? I mean, this guy's like what, I don't know. What is he? 260, 270?
Maybe.
I don't know how big he is. Maybe he's carrying more. I don't know. They have him running the point. He's been doing a good job too.
Yeah, he can handle the rock. Yeah. The dude,
he's been scoring the ball.
He's a different kind of player, man. In a good way.
He really is.
Different kind of player.
But man, this guy at one game, I think one game this week, and he's done this before, where he scored like 30 points, and all of his points, all of his baskets came in the lane.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
He's only 19, 20 years old, man. So when he develops as a player, and he gets to age 23, 24, oh, man.
Yeah. And so they're sort of hanging around out there. Again, I don't expect much from them. I mean, they may make the play-in scenario, and we'll see what happens. But certainly out west, it's going to be a slugfest. And then the question becomes, whoever survives the West, will they be in a position to carry it on into the finals, or would they have been so beat up? You know what I mean? That whoever comes out of the East has an advantage. But look, there's a lot of basketball to be played, though, Rob, between now and end of the regular season. So a lot of what we talked about tonight can change, right? It certainly can change, but we're just talking about the way things look right now. So some interesting storylines in the NBA, some potential matchups that could be really intriguing. But I think right now the NBA is set up for what should be a very exciting postseason.
Yeah, I can't wait, man. Even the East is not going to be as exciting, I think, as the West, but I think there's still going to be some great series in the East. But the West, man, must watch, I think, every single game.
You're right. There will be some intriguing matchups. Because you figure with the top 3 teams in the East, you remember when the East was like Cleveland and everybody else?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Where when LeBron was there with Kyrie and everybody, it was like Cleveland and everybody else.
Yeah.
At least in the East right now, right? We talked about those top 3 teams, and then you have teams like Boston and Miami, which are good. So you got 5 good teams out there. So yeah, the matchups are going to be interesting, and you got a lot of star power out there as well, right? Because you talk about Tatum and Brown with Boston, you got Jimmy Butler and Bam and Tyler Hero in Miami, and then obviously with the Nets and with the Sixers and with Milwaukee, real star power. So yeah, there'll be some interesting games out east. No, there's no doubt about that. But the West is stacked. So
it's crazy because out West, we were talking about we have a bunch of one player on each team basically that can take over. We may see a team blow someone out one game because Donovan Mitchell drops 60, and then the next game they lose by 20 points because the other player took over on the other team. It's crazy, man.
Yeah.
Wild.
So it'll be good to let this unfold and see how it all shakes out over these next 5 weeks or so. But yeah, NBA is good stuff right now, man. It's good stuff, and the postseason should be even better. So, all right, brother. So we'll come back again next week, another edition of Sports 360, and we'll sign off for now. So take care, brother. We'll talk again next week. All right.